Hi and welcome to a brand new episode of the Indulge Podcast with me, Romal Raishram. Today on my show, I've got a very special guest, someone from my hometown of Bangalore and someone who I am a huge fan of. I've got Prasad Bidapa with me on the show. Hi and welcome to the show,
Hi,
Prasad.
Roman. How nice to be seeing you again. Been so
Finally.
out of touch for a long time.
I know. Prasad is considered one of India's topmost fashion gurus. He is a lifestyle expert. He's been a designer in the past, but truly out of passion. And we're going to have a conversation with Prasad to find out where his life has led him to and what are the other things he's experimented with. So let's quickly jump into the conversation. So, Prasad, you are known first and foremost for being someone who is a fashion guru. How did that happen? How did your entry into the world of fashion begin?
I think I came from a family that was always interested in fashion. My mom was very stylish. Dad was also a very cool guy. And, they went to a lot of parties. And my earliest memories are of my parents dressing up to go out and my mother wearing all sorts of flashy Banaras saris. And, I think, we had magazines lying around the house like Vogue and Woman's Zone and magazines that took 6 months to be shipped from wherever they were coming from. So we were already out of date by the time we read it. But I think it inculcated in me a sense of style, a knowledge of fashion. I was reading about designers like Schiaparelli and Dior when I was a youngster. So I have my history of fashion pretty much sorted. And then, I also became part of India's movement where when we discovered fashion, I happened to be around. And of course, it was the first great lady of fashion, Ritu Kumar, who was the first designer to be called that
Absolutely.
in India. And soon after, it was my batchmates like Abraham and Thakur, people like Rohit Bal, Tarun Tehliani. These were the ones who were joining the industry and, were at the forefront of design. And then came the next generation whom we were teaching, boys like Sabyasachi and Anamika Khanna and Manish Arora, people like that in the next generation. So I've kind of seen the evolution of fashion in India. So I think I'm in a particularly good place to watch and comment on it, Romal. So that's how it started for me.
Now, I think the first question that comes to anyone's mind is you are literally from a generation that kind of defined what Indian fashion is. As you said, a lot of your contemporaries like Abraham and Thakur and Rohit Bal. But you chose not to get into fashion and you decided to look at, the more technical side of the fashion industry. You got into model management, you started one of the biggest pageants in India and all of those kind of things. So why did you make that decision? Because you clearly come from a background in design.
Yeah. I was very keen to be a designer. I went to NID to study textile design, but wound up studying graphic design. But at the end of the day, I didn't much like the business of fashion. Sitting in these horrible factories with no air conditioning in the middle of summer and seeing people sweating over the clothes they were making. It was not my idea of glamour. I was much happier dealing with a finished product. And I think in a way that helped me bond with a lot of designers because I wasn't in competition with them. So there was never a sort of conflict of interest. So I've worked with every big designer in this country at some point or the other because I don't think I represented a competing viewpoint or competition in any way. I was somebody over there to promote them. And then, of course, I started doing fashion shows, which I've been doing since the time I was 16. I was doing them in college too, and that was always my first love, the presentation of fashion,
Absolutely.
to make it look glamorous and wonderful. And because of that, we started training models. So that became a corollary to the whole thing. So it was very interesting that I chose to go into the promotion of fashion. And I'm very happy with that. And the contests happened along the way because I think we derived and became one of the best training houses in the country for young models. In fact, we are the only ones who do not charge the models anything to be
Fabulous.
trained. We just do it on a complete aspect of merit. We have, like yesterday, we had an audition at Phoenix MarketCity for which almost 1,000 young people turned up. And we sort of whittled it down and finally settled on a number of about 50 youngsters whom we felt had the potential to become models globally. Because now we are looking at positioning models from India in China, in places like the Middle East, in places like Europe. Though Europe, of course, is a dying market today, so, we're not terribly interested in that so much. But emerging markets like Russia and China are very exciting. And I feel that's where the future is going to be. So.
Considering the fact that you very openly say that you do come from a background in design, but you have always enjoyed more of the promotion of fashion, Where did the idea of starting the whole Prasad Bidapa model hunt start? Where did that come from? And right now, how big are you? Because I do know you're in multiple cities. Every year, the number of cities you go to, changes. How many models do you represent? How many people do you bring into the industry? We should also tell our listeners and viewers that Prasad is known to be someone who introduces some of India's finest models to the industry. So, where did this whole journey start? How did you get into it? And what's the kind of energy that drives the Prasad Bidapa model hunt?
I think it started in college really because that's where I got my first gig. I was in St. Joseph's and I had a cousin, Anita, who studied at Jyoti Nivas. And she came to me and she said, "Oh, Prasad, you dance so well. Come and help us with our little fashion show that we are doing." So I went there to help them do a fashion show and not realizing it was going to be the beginning of a whole career for me. And then that fashion show was very successful. And the models in that show were girls like Renuka Chowdhury, who later became a minister for women and child development. And I had some great looking faces. So through the years, fashion shows became part of the business of earning pocket money. You get 300 rupees to do a fashion show. And that was big money in those days, make no mistake. We could go out and eat at Blue Fox for 50 bucks, and have a four-course meal. And Desmond would serve us a couple of drinks and steak and dessert and everything for 50 rupees. I mean, those were the days, really. But that's how it started for me. And because we were doing fashion shows, we needed models. So then the training of models became a necessary thing. And then the photography of models, the grooming of models, the styling of models. Then about 15 years ago, we started doing it in a very formal way. And every year we would have the Prasad Bidapa model hunt and, it would sort of result in a whole new batch of models coming into Bangalore mainly, from where we exported them to Bombay and Delhi. So even today, you'll find a lot of the girls who are working in Bombay and Delhi are people who started under our umbrella. So that's always wonderful to have. I mean, even the film stars, we've trained girls like Anushka Sharma and before her, Deepika Padukone. And after that, there was Jacqueline Fernandez, whom we discovered in Sri Lanka. And all these girls came for training and then we pushed them and sort of placed them with various agencies around the country. And it was all good, it sort of worked out very well for us. And then the big players like Phoenix MarketCity came on board to say that we would like to buy the franchise for Bangalore and Chennai and Lucknow and Bombay, where the big malls are. So we go where the demand is really. And I'm very, very keen to do the B cities too, because I was found in my life that young people who come from the big cities all eat McDonald's food and get fat. And so it's always the young people from the smaller cities who are not very well off, who are the ones who are actually truly beautiful and slender.
And in great shape, yeah.
And in good shape. So it's a thing, So we wherever we do a show, we manage to pull in people from the smaller cities to come in also. So in Chennai, I've got a whole lot of young people from Kerala who've come in, from Tamil Nadu, from Bangalore also. So it's all good, I mean, we like to train as many young people as possible. And then Kevin Oliver from Dubai joined me. And Kevin's been a friend forever. We've been, friends from childhood. And he said, you really must formalize this training because it's such a good training program. And that's how it evolved and became the Prasad Bidapa Mega Model Hunt as we know it today. So.
Before we go into your fashion choices, and I know you have a huge passion for handloom and stuff like that, let's quickly go further into this whole exploration of your love for fashion and presentation of fashion. You also have your own fashion week and you've had several editions of it in Bangalore.
Yeah.
So how did the idea behind that come?
Well, it was, somehow I wanted to create a platform for younger designers. And because of the lack of a better name, it became the Prasad Bidapa Fashion Week, which a lot of people thought, oh my God, how cheeky. He has a fashion week named for himself. But that wasn't really, I wasn't trying to, aggrandize myself or anything like that. What I was trying to do was to create a platform on which I could show people who had a genuine love for fashion, who were not just ripping off the West or making clothes with horrible synthetic imports. I wanted people who were working with weavers and working with the craftsmen of India, whom nobody pays any attention to, Romal,
Very true.
And I wanted to be that person who would turn the spotlight on them. And I think in a way, we've been quite successful with it. We promoted the Rajasthan Heritage Week with Vasundhara when she was the CM, and she was a wonderful, wonderful person who understood the importance of artisanal work in India and said to me that I want to see my fabrics and my block prints, my leheria, my bandhani in every big designer's work. And that's how it started. And we managed it quite well. And I've replicated it in different states. And it's somehow, I really believe that Indian artisanal work is true luxury. You know, when I see a beautiful Banaras sari or a Kanjivaram sari, I think to myself, you know, this is what art and fashion is all about. This is luxury. It's handmade. You know, 6 weeks of mehnat, you know, from a weaver who sits there calculating and fine-tuning and producing some of the most beautiful textiles in the world. And yet we value a bag that is mass-produced in a factory all over the world or assembled in one particular country, and we all say, oh my God, look at that bag, it's worth 3 lakhs, it's worth 4 lakhs. I'm like, hello, you know. So you look at a Banaras sari selling for 70,000 rupees, and then some woman comes along and says, oh no, it's too expensive. How much will you give it me for? And I say, would you like to go and argue at a Louis Vuitton showroom about the price of a bag? Why are you arguing here? So whenever we do an exhibition or a heritage week, which always is led by an exhibition, we have big signs up saying no bargaining, because we feel that the artisans are charging a very fair price for what they're doing. And sometimes I find that they are underpricing themselves. At which point we move in and course correct and say a Kota Doria sari being sold for 9,000 rupees is ridiculous. It has to sell for at least 15,000 rupees. And the weavers would say, oh, who will buy? And we said, do you realize that people who buy from you are reselling it for 30,000 rupees? So you're losing out. So why don't you just get with it, you know? I mean, I'm someone, I think I speak for the artisans because I find that they've been marginalized to such an extent. And if we marginalize them, then the world will marginalize us. And I really feel that I have to take their work and show it to people like, you know, we went to Japan and we were invited by Issey Miyake for a completely different reason, because I'd made a film on the great Martan Singh, who's one of the biggest textile experts of India. And he passed away, unfortunately, a year after I had done the film. So suddenly my film became very valuable and everyone wanted it. And I got a call from the Issey Miyake Foundation saying that Mr. Miyake would like to show it in Tokyo. And I said, of course you can show it in Tokyo. And they said, how much will you charge us for it? So I said, there's no charge for it. It's an existing film. I know it's already been paid for. And they said, really? Then we would like to invite you to Tokyo. So off I went to Tokyo with a couple of my colleagues. And we carried all the developmental work of the fabric that we had done in Rajasthan. And they loved it. And Mr. Issey Miyake, I mean, like, you know, I just was so upset when he passed away this year. But he understood the beauty of Indian handlooms enough to start a label called Haath. You must go and look at it, HAAT. It's a tribute to Indian handicraft and textiles and heritage traditional weaves. And, you know, I mean, the Japanese have such a fine-tuned sensibility. He was able to understand the beauty of khadi being produced, you know, by the hand, and they respect it so much, much more than we do. So to me, it was an object lesson in how to view khadi and how to treat it, you know. And it's, you know, Roman, I must explain very quickly for the benefit of your listeners the difference between khadi and handloom.
Absolutely.
Now, khadi is when the thread is spun on a charkha, the way that Gandhiji used to do, and that hand-spun thread is taken to a handloom and woven. That is khadi. And it can be made in cotton, in wool, in silk. But handloom, like the great handlooms of India, like Kanjivaram and Banaras and Kota Doria, do not use charkha-produced thread. They use machine-produced thread. But the machine-produced thread is woven on a handloom. So that's a handloom. But khadi is when the thread and the thing is handmade. So, you know, they say that the charkha is an act of such contemplative beauty that you're concentrating on making the thread, and that if your concentration breaks, the thread breaks.
Wow.
You know, and it's quite wonderful the way you look at it, and you just think that, you know, what the mood of the weaver was when he wove that fabric. Was he sad? Was he happy? I somehow feel that the feelings are imbued into the fabric because
Right.
it's done by hand. Until today, I know that a child wrapped in old khadi, swaddling, sleeps much better than the kind of mother care and mother choice and all the rubbish that we buy our children. So it's time to get back to khadi because it's truly, I think, gold, for India. And what we can do with it is that we can create so much of employment in this country that I've been after the Prime Minister's office for them to include spinning and weaving as a course
Lovely.
and make it become part of a curricula, that people could use and people from abroad could come and study. Why not? And in Karnataka, where I hail from, we have the entire silk belt, from Bangalore to Mysore.
True.
From Bangalore, you travel through Chanpatna and Ramnagaram. You come to Srirangapatna, to Mandya, to Mysore. And this is where this beautiful silk of India has been produced for over 3,000 years, and now hardly at all. How sad is that? So we look to promoting this in such a way that the world will understand the beauty of khadi, come to India, order what they want to, pay the right price for it, and bring prosperity to a community who number almost 21% of India. When think about it, agriculture, sheep rearing, silkworm rearing. So it's all those divisions also before the thread even gets made, and then you actually weave everything. You dye it, you print it, you block print it, you can do so many things to it. So you can imagine how many people it encompasses. So that is truly my ambition. It's something I would like to be part of to achieve.
Good time for me to remind our listeners that this is the Indulge Podcast with Roma Laishram, and with me today on the show is Prasad Bidapa. Let's quickly get into another set of questions, this time slightly more personal. You are accredited with bringing the Kurgi identity to a global level. Of course, there were musicians before you, a lot of them were involved in the armed forces, but you brought them out into the world of fashion. So, how close are you to your native ties, and what is the whole Kurgi experience according to you?
I'm very, very close to Kurg because, it's a very strong identity that's sort of inculcated into us and imbued into us from the time of childhood. And we are told how special we are, how special our cuisine is, how special our food is, our clothes are, and the people are. And we had General Karyappa and General Thimaya, and we had all these wonderful men who fought in the army and the air force and the navy, because I think Kurg gave a lot of young men to the forces, and so we grew up with a very strong sense of identity. I mean, I myself tried to join the Air Force, didn't quite make the grade, but my father and my brother were both in the Air Force. So I was very much a services brat, and I remained close to that ethos even today. And it's quite wonderful because, my cousins, I come from a very large extended family. On my father's side, I have about 40 cousins. And on my mother's side, I have about 13 cousins. So almost 50 cousins all over the place, and their children and their children's children. So we are a big clan, and we stay connected on WhatsApp groups. Thank God for WhatsApp groups. So every day I get a couple of messages from my cousins. I send out a couple of messages to them. And Kurg is sort of in a way, I sometimes say we are the Pahadis of the south, because we are, and you sort of see in Kurg men are always trudging up and down mountains and growing coffee and oranges and cardamom and rice. And so going to Kurg is a walking experience also. You walk into the valley, you walk up the mountain, you're always walking somewhere or the other. And it's quite wonderful. And I stay connected because, as my cousins and my nephews and my nieces get married, we go back for celebrations. We have one coming up on the 22nd when my young nephew Bopes is getting married. So we're all so excited about it and looking forward to it. And the cousins groups are busy discussing how many of us are coming and how many of us are going to be there and what are you wearing. And, so it's fun. I just love being part of the Kurg diaspora. So
Quickly now moving on to your other passions in life. You've often been commended for your great presence on stage. We often wonder why you don't do emceeing as a full-time job because you're really good. How come you never thought of radio or acting or any of these other industries that you would have definitely excelled at?
I don't know, Roman. It's just sort of, I think I've built such a strong identity in this that people associate with me with fashion. And I tend to anchor my own shows because we are doing almost a show a week or, or sometimes more. So I have no time to do anybody else's work, and I don't think that they'd be very keen to have me over there blathering on, sort of, and taking over. So I don't know. I'm sort of quite happy in the niche that I'm in. And I also believe in many ways that you have to have a life balance of time for yourself, time for the family, and time for work. For me, it's not all about work. It's not all about my family. It's not all about myself. It is a combination of these things, And the older I get, the more I realize that the me time becomes very, very important.
Absolutely.
And I have to have so much of time to myself. I have to be able to read a certain amount of books every month. I can't live without that, It's something that for me is very, very important. So even if I work all morning, after lunch I'll take a couple of hours off on a day that I don't have appointments and things to just settle down with a book and read. Because for me, reading is really my primary inspiration. It's where my ideas come from. It's from where, I pride myself on the fact that I've never repeated a show twice. There's always a different stage design, always a different backdrop. The designer changes, the music changes, and yet I see so many people around me repeating the same show that they do year after year after year, and which is why there's no growth in it.
Absolutely.
And I always think to myself, they should read, maybe that's what will get them. So I can read. My wife teases me. She says, I get you a packet of groundnuts in a twist of newspaper, and the next thing you do, you're reading that twist of newspaper. But I am a reader. I just love that whole aspect of reading. And I feel very sad, that the new generation hardly reads at all. Not the way you and I read, Roman, because I know that you're an avid reader and a bookaholic also, So for me, it's something where I feel that it keeps your mind fresh, it keeps your mind young, and it keeps you ideated with new ideas, youthful ideas. And for me, that's very important because I believe that youth is truly the key factor in everything that we do. So I keep telling young people, I said, you don't understand the power of youth, what you can do and what you can achieve. So don't just sit around waiting for something to happen, go out and make it happen. That's always been my motto in life. So.
Nice. So now you've been Prasad Bidapa, the fashion guru, you've been Prasad Bidapa, the model, discoverer, you've played several roles in your life. You've also been married, you have two wonderful children. What is that one thing that you need to conquer now at this stage in your life that you think you still have to conquer? Something new, a brand new world that you would like to explore?
Like something you'd mentioned earlier, but I would like to direct a film.
Nice.
In fact, that has always been an ambition of mine, but I've never really gotten around to it because every time I've had an offer to direct, they've all asked me to take a year off, a year and a half off, and I can't really afford to do that. I mean, I can't financially afford to leave the work and go and sit there to make a movie and figure out what I'm going to live on, So that's never happened for me, but it is a kind of a dream in a way that sometimes I sort of think it would be fun to do a film and set sort of it in the fashion industry and show people how it goes on, and maybe I could teach people through the film also. So maybe a documentary one day. So let's see.
The truth about India's fashion industry.
The truth about India's it's very
From
boring
the voice.
truth. There's no truth behind it at all. So.
Okay, good time for me to remind our listeners that this is the Indulge Podcast with me, Roma Laishram, and I've got Prasad Bidapa with me on the show. Right now, we enter my favorite part of the whole podcast, which is the rapid fire. Only 5 questions, but you have to be super honest. Okay, so here goes. First question. What is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
I drink 5 glasses of different liquids, from lime juice to haldi pani to warm water mixed with mint. But I have a hydration routine in the morning, which happens as soon as I wake up, and I cannot live without that.
Super. What is the last thing you do before you go to sleep every night?
The last thing I do before I go to sleep is, if I'm traveling, I wish my family good night, or I am reading. It's one or the other.
Lovely. What vegetable do you think you resemble and why? What vegetable do you think you resemble and why?
What vegetable do I think I resemble? Oh my God, that's a funny question. What do I resemble?
It's a rapid fire, Prasad.
Maybe it's a pumpkin. I don't know.
But you don't look like a pumpkin.
I don't look like a pumpkin. What do I look like? I don't know. I mean, sort of. This is the oddest question anyone's
Which is
ever
why I'm
asked me.
asking you the question. Okay, we'll come back to that one. Okay, the next one. What is your spirit animal and why?
My spirit animal would be, I think, a tiger.
Nice. And why? Why do you have
I,
that fascination?
you know, in Ranthambore, I had a very spiritual experience with tigers, and they were sort of such wonderful, beautiful animals with such confidence and, you know, brave and fierce and strong. And there was something about them that really attracted me. So I think for me, that would be it.
Amazing. And if you weren't Prasad Bidapa, the fashion guru, what do you think you would have been in life?
Maybe a school teacher.
Wow,
Yeah, I
teaching
like
what
teaching.
subject?
You know, I actually was studying biochemistry when I went back and joined NID, but biochemistry was what I was studying in college. So maybe I'd have been a biochemist and won a Nobel Prize by now. Who knows?
I'm sure you would have. And my last and final question, in Prasad Bidapa, the biopic, who do you think should play your character?
So, who would I like to play myself in the movie? I'd like Abhay Varma, the youngster who played in Family Man. I thought he was a very sensitive, wonderful actor. And I'd like to think I looked a little bit like him all those years ago.
I've seen your younger pictures. You were quite the hottie.
Thanks,
On that
Roman.
beautiful note, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you so
Prasad.
much, Roman. It's a pleasure talking to you. And so good to catch up with you again, too,
Absolutely.
really.
Absolutely.
So wonderful. I'm so glad you made the effort and came out to
I'm so glad you made
find
time
me.
for me.
Definitely,
so on that beautiful
always.
note, thank you so much for tuning in to
Thank
the
you.
Indulge
Thank you
Podcast.
so much.
This is Prasad Bidapa and me, Roma Laisham, saying bye.
And thank you to all the readers for tuning in and listening, and the listeners, the readers, and everybody who's watching. Thank you.